This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
1, 2, 3, 4.
You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. All right, I have been looking forward to this for a damn long time. Dave, you've been on previously, but before we introduce all that, what people don't know about you, or the listeners from that episode, is that your background is, I guess, you're a meat scientist. And, I have this crazy idea that you just... frizzy hair, shoving probes and whatnot into steaks. So we're going to dive into that. But obviously, before we get into it, you probably recognise Dave, Fish, Eat, Repeat. We had him on for drone fishing. Love that channel. Even better now, we've got a separate channel, Hunt, Eat, Repeat, and we're going to get into your hunting a bit later as well. Mate, where do you find the time? That's the first thing I'm looking at going, holy crap, I'm just starting to flick things out because tech's a bit better on YouTube and shorts and all that sort of stuff. Mate, you're pumping out different channels. Mate, you're all over it. How do you do it?
A lot of questions. Hey, firstly, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the last time we chatted, and stoked that we can catch up again. The only thing is I'm a food scientist. I'm not a meat scientist, which is a minor difference. I just know a lot about the meat of the food science, but it's encompassing. I specialize in food safety, but from wild game, I've become a lot more knowledgeable on the meat science perspective. But as for myself, how did I get into it and how do I have time? Oh, goodness gracious. I got into food science because I love food. Pretty big guy. I've always enjoyed eating. I wanted to get into engineering actually and didn't make the cut into chemical engineering. So I picked the first thing that had chemical engineering papers, which was food science, out of school and into uni. And then 1 year in, I was like, this is just the best thing I've ever done. Learning about food is what I love. I've always been absolutely obsessed with food, like just to that scientific kind of granular level. The cooking, the process, the bringing people together, all that stuff is what I'm always about. And so, I did my degree and then got a job in food safety, and I work in food manufacturing for the last 13 or so years, maybe a bit longer now, 14 years. And I haven't really looked back. And then so that job keeps me busy. It's quite a demanding job, and takes a lot of time, obviously. How I got into social media was kind of by mistake. I had Snapchat. Most of my uni mates are not into fishing and hunting like I was. I'm into fishing and hunting from being brought up in the far north, way up at the top of Doughts Bay in New Zealand. And they just got genuinely sick of me Snapchatting fishing and hunting. And they said, Dave, you should set up Instagram where people care. In a really friendly, funny way, but that's what happened. And so I started Instagram, and that was, 6 years ago. Actually, again, flip nose. That was before we got married, and we married for 8 years. So that was 10 years ago probably now. Lose track of time. And then I've always loved taking videos, just like food. I've always wanted to capture it and kind of share the experience with other people. And I got a crappy camera, a little GoPro 1, I think it was. Bought it secondhand and then started that, and then got into YouTube. Got into fishing quite a lot. Got into drone fishing, as we've kind of touched on last time, by accident. And then where we are today, got more into hunting. I think because of the fact that I love eating. I'm a big kind of fillet and release guy. Not the biggest catch and release person you'd ever meet. And so the hunting part, no one ever asks you how big was it, how old was it. well, not New Zealand and Australia specifically, but it's always whatever you shoot. You either are going to do pest control or you're going to eat it. There's no release part of that, and that's what really enticed me to it, and the fact that it kind of opened up the opportunities of what we could cook rather than just fish and seafood. It was now like, oh, let's replicate beef or lamb or pork or what have you. So that's kind of a little bit how I got. I did pest shooting like with rabbits and 177s and air rifles and stuff as a kid, but I'd never really gone into hunting until the last wee while. And obviously we'll get into that a bit more in the future, but of the call. But the time wise, it takes a lot of time, hey, as you know, social media. One thing though that maybe I shouldn't say so early on the podcast, but I'm an honest guy, is don't trust almost anything you see on social media. The amount of guys and my mate Anthony, if he's watching this, if he'll watch it after, I'll send him the link. He was shocked when he found out how little I fished. Because one fishing trip for me, that's like a big video. I'll turn into a bunch of reels. I love sharing the experience, but I'm a busy guy. I've got a busy day job. I enjoy spending time with my wife, and so I'm not fishing all the time. And if you're editing videos and you're a filmmaker, a video maker, what have you, just like you with podcasts, you've got to sacrifice potential time fishing with that. And I love making videos. It's all part of it. But there's guys out there, and I would go as far to say majority that don't have a YouTube channel or don't podcast, I bet hunt and fish more, than us, because they're not, I'd say, wasting or using whatever the time is on that. So it's opportunity cost. Yeah. So one video might look like I fished heaps, but in reality, I bet I'm fishing less than people think. And they go, I'll get messages, man, you're so lucky, you fish all the time. And I was like, dude, I fished once last month. But I just make it, and not like it, I'm not trying to blow my own horn. That's just part of social media. You make reels and you make content. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I know a lot of people who are not in the social media sphere, and they hunt almost every night.
100%.
Yeah, every day and weekends, every time. And I think this is the big one. One of my mates, he has access, a plethora of it. He's pretty much out morning, night, every chance he gets, after work, days off, he's hunting for the day or whatnot. But then you're right, that's the offset. He could make some really great footage and content, and he's extremely knowledgeable, but then he wouldn't be able to get out there as much as well. And it's such a time-consuming thing. It really is the interesting one. There's a lot of people, you've had it. You probably have people that love your stuff, hate your stuff, and the comments and in between. And I always sort of laugh when I get, not so much comments. I'm reading them a little bit more. I usually just don't even bother. But the messages, people message, and I always think, they've taken that little bit extra time. I'll read it and respond. And the amount of people that reach out to, have a crack, you shouldn't have had this guest on, or I shouldn't have done this or that. And it's like, okay. Or the demand things of you. And I'm like, mate, I'm doing this for free.
Yeah.
I don't have sponsors. I don't, everything I do is at a cost to myself, whether it be time, whether it be effort, whether it be money for gear or whatever. It's all a cost, right? And it's so funny that they get so upset or demanding of you sometimes. And I'm just like, well, chill out. But if it bothers you, stop listening, stop watching. I don't care. This is not my day job. I want to make that very clear. I do this for fun. Yeah. I do this because I love to have conversations. I learn an absolute heap. You'll hear I think it's the next episode coming out. Was with Hunter's Pride, who is basically just does tanning and things like that. Oh, holy crap! I learned a lot in that episode. Things that I just hadn't thought about previously. Things that I literally had not thought about it. And as he was talking, the light bulbs are going off. More the fact that that makes sense. Never thought about it, but that completely makes sense. I had sort of maybe thought about it in a very light sort of way. Fascinating. Learnt 3 or 4 things that episode and just went, this is why I do it. I'm a very curious person. I love 100%. to learn. And hence where I found your channel, because I was into
drone. Your
drone fishing
brother crashed that drone
and all
wasn't
that.
it?
Yeah, he crashed his drone, and
Yeah.
actually, it's a very interesting story. So he ended up upgrading to an Aero Pro.
Oh, sick. Yeah.
Yeah, not so great. He's had some average experience. He shelled out and got the warranty package or something like that. And his last one he's had so much problems with it. The first one he got, end up getting it sent back. It was just communication wasn't great on, I don't know, probably both parts maybe. Finally got it there, and we're talking like return to home, instead of it coming down on the helipad, it crashing into the car park 200 meters up. Like, there was some significant things. And he ended up getting it sent back because it was haywire. They said, yep, no worries, got it. Sent him out the replacement. Didn't realize that the replacement's a refurb. And then he's only had it for a little bit of time, and he started having major issues with that one. Sent it back, and they took it back for this one and said, "Oh, it's covered in salt. The internals are all salt. Like, it's been so." And he's like, "Well, it's never gone in the water. I've only had it not a great deal of time. It's the one you refurbed and sent back to me. Maybe it was the person before me, and you didn't refurb that side of it, because I mean, how do you refurb salt, right? And you're not going to technically see it, I suppose. But anyway, he's I think he'll probably go on another Aero Pro. He's just, look, in fairness, he's just I keep saying, give it up. You're a terrible fisherman. Just give up.
No such thing, man. I do.
Get into hunting. I keep saying get into hunting.
One of my drones. No. So, funny enough, luckily, I deliberately, so far anyway, haven't been sponsored by a drone. You know, I'm sponsored by Drone Fishing, the distributor. But I really like that because I think I can be quite open and honest about the pros and cons of drones. So, you know, I don't have to defend a drone. Like, if it crashes, it crashes, you know, like that's what happens. And obviously I crashed my drone. So it's good to hear. And I don't have to go, oh, you sure you didn't shit? You know, shit happens, eh? So, no, for sure.
I have said the same sort of thing. I am very big on probably not having sponsorship.
It's so hard, eh? Yeah, then you get locked into bias.
Yes, that. B, there's an amount of expectation and that you have to say the name of the brand so many times, weave it into conversation, do an ad or whatever it might be. And if you don't believe in the products, we've got a problem. And here in Australia, it's probably an even bigger issue, is because there's a couple of big companies that import a heap of different products. Now, you might love one product, but the other product you're not a fan of. But you've got to sort of toe the line. And I don't know, I can hear it. You know, it's probably, well, and this is a nice little segue, because we were talking about I don't listen to podcasts. And one of the reasons I was originally, I always did. And then it was sort of a creative thing. But then a couple of the ones I liked were really salesy. And they, like, you can tell they're sponsored by people and they're in bed with someone, and that, like, I don't know, it just, I get that icky feeling. I just get the ick going, yuck, I don't want to, I'm out. There's that in the creative side too, you know, like we were talking just quickly off air, and I said, let's talk about it on the episode, because for me, it's that creative side, and I don't want to see or listen to guests, because I want to have a genuine conversation like you and I. You know, pretty much every guest I get on, we have a 2-minute conversation before we start recording, and we're into it. Rare occasion someone wants to have a chat to me on the phone, and I don't really like to, because I liked it to be just an authentic conversation. Occasionally I do, if the person's sort of nervous or want to have a chat or whatever, I do. But for me, I don't know, even after having a phone conversation with someone prior to an episode, I then sometimes change questions,
for sure. It becomes a little bit less organic, a little bit less authentic.
It does. And I'm 100%. Thinking about it, and then I don't want my content to come across scripted or like whatnot. That's just not what it is. It's just it's a chat. If it wasn't recorded, it'd be the same sort of conversation. That's what I sort of aim at. And it does make me nervous if I was listening to other people. I don't know, just having that in my background. Yeah, but you had a different opinion, so I want to hear.
Oh, yeah. No, I think, and you mentioned it right early on about learning, you know, about tanning. I think as soon as you go into a conversation thinking you know the answer, you're in trouble, eh? You know, in terms of like, you can always learn. Like, I'm always learning, doesn't matter what it is, if it's science or hunting. But with the podcast, so it was actually, I think definitely my wife was the leader of it, where my YouTube videos are doing okay, and she was watching, obviously random unrelated YouTube videos like on accounts or makeup or cooking or whatever. And she's a scientist actually as well, but she just doesn't watch science videos. But she said to me, there was this really intelligent chick who was talking about sponsorships and blah blah blah, and she was like, "You should watch more YouTube videos." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I try, but I don't have time. I'm doing my own videos as you asked, and blah blah blah." And she was like, "Yeah, but how are you going to get better? And look at potential hooks and intros and asking questions and talking to the camera, because I wasn't talking to the camera as much, and maybe my audio could be improved and blah blah blah." And so she was 100% right. Like when I started watching YouTube videos before I made YouTube, and I think it'd probably be similar to podcast, you go, "Oh yeah, that was a cool podcast." But the problem is now when I watch a YouTube video, I'm more like, "Oh, that was an interesting shot." "Oh, that angle was awesome," and "Oh, that's a cool cut." And like, so you're taking it from a really different editorial perspective. And I fully understood what you said on the previous dog trapping podcast around, you don't want to bias yourself with information, which I 100% agree with. And like a lot of my YouTube videos that I watch, to be honest, is how to edit. You know what I mean? And podcasts, like you could be watching listening to the most random podcast. It doesn't even have to be hunting, but there's those like cues and quips and things. So that was actually more the suggestion I was going to add, is rather than trying to think it's a bias, which they can be. And, you don't want to ask the same question as some other podcast has been on, guest has been on another podcast, but more just around continuous improvement, I guess. So.
Well, look, agreed, because I am all about continuing to improve myself. 100% agree there. I tend to do that I'm similar to you. My YouTube and that, I will watch hunting videos. I will watch fishing videos as well and sort of learn and go through that. So, and then, as you said, I like to learn. So even with podcasting,
yeah, exactly.
And, up until probably a couple of weeks back, I was not doing any shorts or reels or anything like that. Now, most definitely am, because tech's got heaps better, being able to do it. I don't want to spend 4 or 5 hours. I don't get paid for this, so I don't really want to do 4 or 5 hours worth of time for it. For me, it is a hobby. It is a passion. I love it. I love chatting to people. I like putting stuff out there that is putting hunting in a positive light and discussing it.
100%.
That's all for me is where it's at. So I probably, if anything, I'm with you. I'm very big on the audio, the sound of it.
The
video
especially
quality.
Podcast, yeah, for sure.
Man, and you know what? That has, again, we go back to why I sometimes don't listen anymore. There's been a couple that, the audio has just been so bad. I've had to go between up and down of the on the volume, trying to work out. It's just not worth it. I sort of get to the point where podcasts, forget hunting, go to any other genre that I listen to. If the audio quality is not good, I'm out. I don't care how good the content is. If I can't hear the damn thing, it's pointless. And maybe I'm getting old, ripe old age of
no way, man. I literally,
40s.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I can't do it. Same as the videos. Like there's been hunting and fishing videos. There's some really good stuff, and there's some there that have just terrible microphones, and you can hear they're just running off the standard GoPro mic or whatever it is. And it's windy, and you're just sitting there going, I can't hear, or it's just like the whole wind sound. I'm like, no, I'm out. That's now, I suppose, with the podcast and now being, I guess, so
like sensitive to
audio,
it. Yeah, 100%.
It ruins so many podcasts for me. Before, I would have listened to them before starting my own, would have listened, no issue. And my wife's like laughs at it now, because I'll be sitting there and going, oh, there's an issue here. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? And she's like, well, what is wrong with you? And I go, yeah, look, I know,
it just ruins it.
Obsessive compulsive.
It's part of it. Weirdly, I was
is.
looking around like an idiot before I was trying to find these. This is not sponsored in any way. These are DJI mic minis. And
yes, I've heard really good things.
I went from GoPro to DJI because you don't need an extra attachment or anything. That the transmitters and the receivers of the mics connect in, and the mics, man, I could talk about them for days. But in a really long story short, the mics can go for about 100 meters. You can turn off and on your camera with the mic. I should get a bloody sponsorship, DJI. And I've got like 6 mates of YouTubers. They've all converted to DJI because it's just an absolute game changer. My biggest issue with hunting and fishing videos for myself personally was you'd go, get the shot, get the fish, screaming, that was amazing, go and check. Either GoPro overheated, that was the worst issue. Or the second one is blowing half a gale, or there's waves and, shit, and everyone's swearing. And then you go listen and you hear or silence. And it just killed it for me. Like the buzz of the editing was gone. The fact that I knew I'd have to do a voiceover or, edit it in such a way, blah, blah, blah. Whereas now, my gosh, man, like and that's genuinely one of the reasons even I split out my channels, because I was able to spend less time faffing around. Like the audio is so clear, I can see the audio and text files, as I'm editing. Like there's no need for me to do this extra pissing around, and it's just been a game changer for myself mentally to edit and be able to know, really confident in my dad. He's really pragmatic, very honest. He's a professional editor before he retired, and he'd be like, audio's crap, oh, that was a bit glitchy, or I didn't understand that. And now he's like, that's awesome. Like, he's half deaf. He's like crystal clear. I can hear everything you're saying. And yeah, I can't agree any higher around how important I think audio is. My big YouTuber that I watch a lot of is Pedro, and man, his, cinematic level top stuff, but it makes such a difference when you feel like you're there, like you can hear the whispering, and even when you're hunting, that whispering level of nothing's missed. It feels like you're right in with the hunt. That's my like peak. What I always aim for is it feels like you're right there, and you don't go, oh, change volume, right at the point that it gets really intense, or, you don't skip because you can't hear what they're saying because the wind's blowing 40 knots.
Here's your report.
Oh, thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire someone just like you.
Try LinkedIn Hiring Pro. It's more than a job board. It's like the recruiter you always wished you had. Hiring Pro uses real-time insights to match your role to LinkedIn's unique network of professionals and delivers a short list of best fit candidates. You'll spend less time sorting applicants and more time talking to the right people.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Hire right the first time. Post your job for free on LinkedIn today at linkedin.com/quality.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's been a couple that I haven't sort of wanted to put out, but I need an episode for the week, and I don't like missing weeks. It's like rare occasion if something's going on and I can't. And I've done a couple in the car just on the way to a hunt and just gone,
just always a grin
burns
afterwards,
me inside just doing it. But it also, I don't know, it's one I'm trying to lean away from. I've heard really good thing about DJI. I tend to obviously use Rode, but where I've really wanted to do some hunt camps, and every hunt camp lately, even the latest one for Croak Camp this year with Frodo and Dave, and I had to use a shotgun mic off one of the receivers because there was two of them.
Yeah,
and
Then, it just makes it so hard.
On my Sambar one, I was passing around the mic like in a microphone. And I was just like, this sucks.
Yeah.
So
it's.
I am the next investment,
dude. $130, I think, is the new mic minis. It's a joke. It's so stupid. And they'll plug into your phone.
How many do you get?
2, mate. And that plugs into your phone.
Yeah.
So if you got a phone, it's fucking crazy.
So I've got the Rode similar one that plugs in the phone. I love that. It's really good. Problem now is I've got no data left on my phone. Like storage is ridiculously gone. Anyway,
don't use the S word.
I know. The one I want one that I can get more mics. So I found a couple that you can get like 4 mics. And I was like, that is what I'm going to look for, because I do like going to hunt, like have a camp, have a couple of people there and sit down, have a beer and just have a chat. And, sometimes I find it super interesting remembering details that we might have forgotten about later. It's always the way.
100%.
So, I'm playing around with that. I also heard the DJI came with one that the camera can move as well.
That's the pocket. Yeah, that's for your style, and for the vlogging kind of stationary style. That's incredible. It's like way better than the 360, or I've got the 360 and the OM5. And I could talk about bloody cameras and stuff until the cows come home.
Well, let's get back to where you were. We got you on for the talk about the food science, more in particular meat. This isn't a vegan show, so let's focus on some of the things. Like, there is so many opinions and information out there. Should you hang it on the bone because the meat, is unable to stretch properly if it's if you cut it off the bone, so it's going to not be as tender. I know some people soak things in milk. What is the preferred amount of time for meat to be, I guess, hung? Should you dry? I skin on versus skin off. I personally always wet age because I find it real easy at camp to chop up, vac seal it when I'm out, because I get home and my kids want to spend time with me. I haven't got time to chop up deer. So I tend to wet age. Is that the best approach? Probably not. It's nice and clean though. That always works, and not having to do much when I get home. There's so much to it. From your perspective, what do you do and why do you do it? And let's, I've got probably a million questions as we go here.
All good. I'll try my best.
Let's get into it.
Before we get into it further, if someone thinks I've said something wrong, I probably have. So, we're not all perfect, and just try my best. So this is what I personally
And you're
do.
a New Zealander. It's probably
We'll let me off as a Kiwi.
There'll be so many people going, no, I don't listen to him. He's across the ditch. But hey, I'm listening to you.
No. So, goodness, a lot to unpack there. I guess for starters, my goal personally, and again, there'll be a lot of people, including my dad, who disagree here, but my goal is for meat, wild game, not to taste gamey. Some people go, I love the gamey flavor. That's absolutely fine, but I want to give it to my wife. I want to give it to friends, family, work colleagues, whatever. And my peak, what I really aim for, and what I think is mass success for me, is when I give someone some wild game, and maybe I haven't told them, I've prepared it for them, whatever, and then I tell them afterwards, and they go, bullshit. Like, that's not wild deer. Well, deer's probably not the most gamey thing. That's not wild goat or duck or rabbit, or it doesn't matter what it is. Like, they're like that can't be wild. There's no gaminess. It's super tender, or there's no smell. There's no off flavors. It's just beautiful meat. That's where I sit. That's like my 100%. And anything below that, it's a bit chewy, but it tastes nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's understandable for wild game. Down to, I haven't really had it much except when I ate mullet out of Carapera Dam, which we spat out. But that's like, this tastes like mud. This is horrible. I don't want people to eat when I prepare it anyway, or meat I give them. I never want someone to go, I ate it because you gave it to me. You know what I mean? Like, because wild pork is probably not going to be as good as some beautiful farmed pork belly that we're going to cook Korean style, like, let's be honest. But if it tastes very nice and it was free or cheap, and where it's come from, and you remember that, and all that incredible memories and experiences and friends and camaraderie and blah blah blah, then that's a win for me. So in a really long way, that's like my focal point of how I prepare my food. That's kind of my top. Then comes you mentioned wet age and dry age and cutting and skin and blah, blah, blah. Again, this is just from my experience and my personal opinion, but generally speaking, a lot of bad flavor or even food safety, so food poisoning or food spoilage, so, maybe a bit acidic, it's whatever, is likely to do with either enzymes or fat oxidizing, or most likely to be bacteria. So that's your Salmonella, your E. coli, Staphylococcus, E. coli, coliforms, etc., etc. A lot of that bacteria may come from, bad cleaning the animal, which we'll go on to separately. But once that bacteria is on the meat, that's the point where if you what's called use what's the word I'm looking for? Temperature abuse. That's when you're going to start getting bad flavors. That's when you're going to start noticing maybe it tastes a little bit more testosterone or what have you, because you're allowing the meat to start degrading, to oxidize, or to age, or to start going off from spoilage. So with basically any bacterial growth, bacteria either needs oxygen or no oxygen, if it's anaerobic or aerobic. It needs heat. So different bacteria will grow in different temperature conditions, but usually the bad bacteria for us are the ones that like mammals, the ones that like us. They run at about 37 degrees, down to about 10 degrees, because that's human body temperature and atmospheric temperature. Those bacteria that maybe run at -7 degrees or something, or up in the 60s, probably not going to be as risky. There's some weird halophiles or thermophiles or something. It's that kind of critical temperature that everyone talks about, leaving chicken on your bench. That's your bad temps, your temperature abuse. Then what bacteria needs is water. So that's where it's a little bit of a catch-22 with the wet wet aging, which I'll get into a little bit. So bacteria needs food. And food source. So protein, carbohydrates, which is in your meat, your fats. It needs temperature and it needs water. So some bacteria are what's called aerobic. So that's when if you dry age, or you vacuum seal it. So when you do with your vacuum seal wet age, or you wrap that up tightly, use Glad wrap, whatever, that can be enough to reduce the bacterial growth. You don't have spoilage. You've also got the fact that if you keep it chilled, then enzymes can still do their magic, and enzymes will help with the proteases and stuff to break down the protein. So you can what's called age it, or break it down, make it more soft and tender, even when doing wet aging. The risk I see personally, and I know there's kind of a big 50-50 split in the meat side of things around aging, is that wet aging, in my opinion, can potentially be worse for bacterial growth because you're giving it lots of moisture. Now, when it's vacuum sealed, that's fine because you've probably not got aerobic bacteria. But if you've got an anaerobic bacteria like Clostridium botulinum, which you might know from like canned goods, that's kind of the only risk that people talk about there. That's when it can still grow in an anaerobic condition. It's got lots of water. If you've left it then out on a bench or something, that's when it's going to start growing quite a lot. Whereas if it's dry, it's not fully dry because there's moisture in the meat, but if you're hanging it, you're allowing blood and stuff to drip off, and blood itself actually is, can grow bacteria really well. And then you've got constant movement. You've got dehumidified air, which is basically no moisture. And then you're in a cool temperature that makes it a lot harder for bacteria to grow. And likewise, you can even dry age it. You'll have got a dry aged fish video where you're dry aging it by wrapping it in a paper towel to exclude or bring out the moisture, then wrapping it in Glad wrap to make it anaerobic, then chilling it. So you're kind of really taking away the potential chance of bacterial growth. So that's kind of the bacterial side. So if you allow bacteria to grow, well, first of all, you might get food poisoning, but the chance is that if you haven't let it go stymie and stink, it might just start getting off flavors, because as that bacteria feeds on protein or feeds on fat, feeds on sugar, it's going to release waste products, and those happen to be, for spoilage bacteria, that might be bad flavors. Or you got molds and stuff as well, but for meats, it's normally bacteria. Then you've got the dry aging part. So that's like your enzymic breakdown, and also some bacteria as well. You've got dry aged or cured hams and pastrami's and stuff like that. That's when you're deliberately using good bacteria. This is when we're trying to stop bad bacteria. So if you do it very carefully and you dry age, whether you hang, whether you do wet age, the enzymes in the meat can help to break down those proteins, and the sinews and stuff can start breaking down a little bit as well, proteases, and that's when you can potentially get a more nicer, softer, more tender meat through dry aging. There is a lot of talk that dry aging venison isn't as important as, say, dry aging beef because it doesn't have the fat content. I'm probably disagree. I don't think dry aging is ever really negative from my perspective, but if you dry age it too much, and by too much, it's kind of all personal. All this is what's called sensory or mouthfeel and opinionated. One person's perfect steak is another person's bad one. So, if you dry age it too much, it'll get tough and you get that hard skin on the outside, and maybe that's not good for some, and maybe they don't want to waste meat, and then others don't. And also, with wet aging, you don't tend to lose mass because it's sitting in water, in kind of an equilibrium compared to the mass loss for dry aging. And compared to wet aging. That's most
I've got a couple of questions before we go here, because firstly, fascinating stuff. I love it. It took me straight back to my kangaroo harvesters accreditation course. And I was just sitting there, and the magic number off the top of my head was 4 degrees. If you get it under 4 degrees, the bacteria that we want to avoid is not going to be able to grow from that heat that you were just talking about. I did not know about any that could survive under that 4 degrees, so I'm glad you touched on that. The next part, and I was, again, crazy thought here, but you talked about wrapping in a paper towel to absorb that moisture coming out. If you did that inside a vac seal, how would that play out? Would that be better wet aging from minimizing bacteria. And look, touch wood, I've never had any bacteria issues, but I am super, super vigilant when I am dealing with my meat. So, for example, I have a Havalon blade. It has the fixed blade on one side, the scalpel on the other that's replaceable. I bounce between them. So I use one for skinning and getting the skin right off. I then go to the fixed blade to cut the meat out. So there is not any cross-contamination. And I will even switch out my gloves. So I'll wear gloves to take and pull the hide back because you're getting dirt and hair and everything on your gloves. Once I've peeled back a whole side, I'll switch that glove out, generally just the one because I've got the knife in the other hand. I'm right-handed, so it's just the left-handed glove. I will then use a fresh glove to cut the meat away and put that into my meat bag. Then I'm very pedantic on making sure contamination's not coming. As you touched on, bacteria, it's, from the environment around. So if you minimize everything you possibly can from anything touching that meat that is foreign, that could have bacteria on it, you then significantly reduce the issues. And that's where a lot of people leave the skin on because then, stuff's not touching the meat. For me, I've always sort of gone, but what about the edges that you've cut off and that are exposed? And then how much can the bacteria move throughout and maybe be under the skin? So I'm not sure if that's a concern on that side, but I know there's a lot I've sort of thrown at you there, but paper towel with the vac seal, and then can anything travel if you've left the skin on?
Yeah, no, great questions. So I actually left something out, and I've got a full YouTube video on how to dry age fish, but when you do the paper towel and vacuum seal, you actually have to, it's quite a rigmarole. It's a lot of admin. And if you're not going to eat it raw, it's probably not worth it. So a lot of this is around dry aging for eating raw fish and sashimi. It becomes super soft, super tender. It's bloody incredible. But assuming you go down that path, you actually end up changing the paper towel out like 3 times in the first day, pretty much. I use real thick paper towels and double wrap it, and you keep changing it until no more moisture comes out. If you didn't do that and just wrapped it, you'd create like an anaerobic environment with lots of water, and you'd go down the same path. It'd go all slimy and yuck and stink and bloody be disgusting. So yeah, that's that side of things, and that dries the fish out really well. It's basically, I'd call it the poor man's chiller, where it's kind of doing the same as hanging a fish on a nice hook and a nice chiller. But if you've just got a fridge, which like myself and my wife won't let me put a big chiller in our garage, then I do the paper towel and Glad wrap or vac seal. So it's kind of emulating that. As for the cutting the meat, that's a good question. So I try and keep my meat. Sorry, first of all, you do an incredible job from what you've described. You probably actually go a bit above and beyond me. Normally with one knife, I'll just wipe it on my leg. I do tend to use gloves, disposable gloves, when I'm doing anything real messy. And so, for example, probably not as much bow hunting because it sometimes isn't as messy, but if I've used a 7mm on a turkey, you might have a bit of damage.
Feathers everywhere.
I've also got a 22 that I mainly use, but that's just as an example. And maybe you got some damaged gut blasted on the meat or something that I might use gloves there, or you've mainly from bullet damage and stuff that you want to cut around and all that. Otherwise, if it's just meat, it's largely kind of sanitary, so to speak, if there's no disease and stuff in it. For the cutting up, so because I cook a lot of food for my dog, he's got a weird health condition. We have to cook all his food. And so either I use chicken breast from the supermarket or any offcut I get from game. I'll take everything. I take the organs, I take the feet, the legs of, shitty, sinewy turkeys and stuff, and just boil it into this huge pot with veggies and stuff. So for starters, I kind of take everything. But if it's for eating, and the same goes for fish actually, back in the day, I would fillet fish as soon as possible. Even with, and this kind of relates to freezing as well, but I'd fill it as soon as possible, butcher it as soon as possible, put it in bags, whatever. If you don't have space, if that's your preference, blah, 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 do that, sweet. What I do now is actually try and keep it in as large pieces as possible, even bone in. So like legs, I literally freeze a whole deer leg pretty much to the shin, so like its thigh, and then its calf, and I tend to freeze them whole in the freezer. vacuum sealed. So I make a big vacuum bag or glad wrap it or whatever, or maybe I cut it in half. I do take the skin off, just mainly probably because I can't be asked. And it'll potentially add a little bit of insulation as it freezes, and it might slow down the freezing process. But when you're butchering in the field, I think if you can't keep the exterior clean in the field, then probably just as clean, if not cleaner, to like leave the skin on, because you haven't, and as you say, it might get the top surface of, the leg when you cut it out of the joint. I just cut that off when I get home. If you've got the tools, you've got the preparation, you've got the bags, whatever, and you're not sitting in a dirt area, then by all means, skin it. That's like what I would personally do. Just because you haven't exposed the meat, you haven't exposed the tissue, the protein to bacteria because it's stayed in that skin. And why I mentioned that I freeze things whole is that bacteria kind of needs oxygen, and the higher the surface area, the more bacteria you'll get, and they don't tend to dig into muscle. They'll normally stay on the surface because they need that oxygen to breathe. And so if you go and cut it up, like with mince, that's why mince is known to be quite dangerous, dangerous in inverted commas in terms of high chance of bacteria, because you've mixed stuff from the outside inside, and if it's got a piece of gut in it or something, you blend that up and kind of homogeneously make it through the meat. But if you've got a big slab of steak, that's why we can normally eat steak rare, you see the outsides. The inside, as long as it hasn't gone off mega and gone seriously bad, like the outside should largely be safe. Sorry, the inside. And likewise, when you're freezing, if I haven't exposed the internal piece of the cut, every time you cut a piece of meat, if you imagine kind of longitudinally, you're actually cutting through all the cells, as you go through. And that's why obviously myoglobin or water, or I don't even mind when people say blood. I think getting caught up on blood versus myoglobin is stupid myself. But, shit leaks out. And as that leaks out, you damage cells. Those cells can start restricting when it freezes. Those cells can start restricting when it's aging or what have you. So I try and keep it in as large pieces as possible that have been exposed to air as little as possible. And I found for myself personally that when you then go and defrost the leg, because sometimes you'll get freezer burn. But if you've got a whole massive leg, the freezer burn that you get might be a little bit that you cut off the thigh and maybe on the outside, but then the whole inside of that piece of meat with a very low surface area is mint. It's like premium. But if you froze them in tiny little packs, then the exterior of every single pack has undergone the same freezer burn or the same temperature kind of abuse. So that's what I've learned over the last few years, is that now I'll freeze in massive pieces. Now, that doesn't make it easier to deal with when you then want to eat it because you've got flipping whole leg. And again, I'm not saying this is what everyone should do. This is just my anal retentive self with my meat. But I'll plan a few cooks based on a leg or something, or so like I'll get the mincer ready, I'll make some mince and make some sausages, or we'll make a roast and blah, blah, blah. And so either I'll roast the whole leg or I'll slice half the leg off and cook that into a stir fry and then mince at the same time. So I do, it's a weird way, and for me, it's actually been quite good because it's broken up the admin at the time, rather than it taking flipping, it feels like 2 days for me, like, come home from work and there's still meat in the freezer, you go, fuck my life, and in the fridge or in the chiller or in the cooler. And then you prep that and you mince it and you prep and you mince, and it just seems, efficiency wise, it is much better. But timing wise, for me, it always seems like an extra admin at the end. Whereas if you've potentially frozen it or you've stored it in big chunks, then the admin comes later. And so you're dealing with that chunk of meat way down the line. But from a functional is probably not the right word, from a meat quality perspective, that's usually the best. And if you think of like an abattoir, which is literally, they're going to be doing it the best of all, to be honest, in terms of what they learned and blah, blah. Big game is usually stored frozen whole. When they ship pork and stuff overseas, a lot of the time they're shipping whole pigs. And that's because every time you cut that up, you're what's called lysing the cells, and you got scaped, you got freezer burn and damage and blah, blah, blah. So the more protection and the less surface area you have, the better your meat, generally speaking. The only caveat would be that if you can't cool it fast enough, because it's so big, it might start going off.
This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
So, a couple of things there. I just had crazy idea as you were talking about if you vac seal, obviously you're trapping in the moisture. If you wrapped it with paper towel, you've got to replace it so often, which I get. I've got these great little vac seal sort of vacuum bags. Mm-hmm. They're just like a plastic seal bag. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but they're essentially like this tiny little circular suction cap that goes onto a special little valve, and you just seal it like normal, suck it out so you can open it back up and reuse it. You just wash them and things like that. Mm-hmm. And while you were talking, I was like, that could be the way to go if you were then going to wrap it in paper towel, use that, then take it out, do it again, take it out, do it again. Once that process had gone from that, then you could chuck it into the vac seal bag. Interesting. All right.
No, 100%.
Another one to throw at you. And I have never done it. I don't think I ever will do it. I have heard people go, there is nothing wrong with getting your servo bag of ice and throwing in the meat into that servo bag of ice and just letting it cool in the water. Now, I don't know, this one raises massive alarm bells for me. They talk about bacteria being in the ice, like there's labels on there saying do not consume. It's there to chill your drinks or whatever it might be. If you're then putting that meat in there, in that water, I know it'll look terrible because it sort of goes that yucky grey sort of colour. Forget that part of it. But that bacteria has got to be, like, you're just exposing it to bacteria for it to grow. Now, I get that it's cold and it's almost like, I don't know, like a slush sort of, combination of water and ice. But you're probably the better man to talk about that. I can't see how that is any way near good food handling practice.
So this is how I would take it. Going from, as cliche as it sounds, probably first principles, but if that's all you had and you could put it in a thing of ice, or you wanted to leave it out on the back of a truck in the warmth, ice all day. You know what I mean? And because it is cold and because you got a slurry, like we store a lot of fish and salt ice slurries and stuff, normally whole. Again, you got that, if it was a big leg and it hasn't been skinned, I think pretty sweet, to be honest. And even if it's not, because party ice, which is, ice for drinks, normally that'll actually be food grade from a supermarket. Then you got your salt ice, which they say is not. It's food grade, it's dirty, blah, blah, blah. But at that temperature, if you don't abuse the meat, you kept it cold, quickly took it out and then dealt with it, I still think you'd probably be quite safe. Water-wise, you get into what's called osmosis, where you're drawing stuff out of the meat and going into the meat and stuff, so that's why it gets grey, and I think it gets a bit shitty. So I don't think it's best from a quality perspective. But if that's all you were doing, and definitely I've done it before, you can dump it straight in ice. I think one thing better is I normally just always take a roll of rubbish bags with me. Well, actually they're not, they're kind of clear plastic food grade bags, but you take a roll of bags with me, dump the meat in that, just tie it off, hope for the best. It's never going to be 100%. That's if you're in the bush, I'm talking, because when we're hunting, this isn't bloody a science room, or, this isn't a kitchen, this is real. There's real risk. And you got to be pragmatic. That's when I'll just wrap it, dump it in the ice that way. So you're just reducing that moisture. The positive thing about dumping it in the ice is your surface contact. So rather than trying to cool it in air, and air has a terrible thermal heat capacity, means it doesn't transfer heat very well. It's both bad for heating and bad for cooling. But if you sit that and submerge it in ice wrapped in a bag, the temperature comes out anyway, but goes in and cools it down really quickly. So you got really quick chilling if you submerge it. But if it's direct product contact, if it's direct contact, then you can start getting freezer burn, or when it's in a freezer, or you start getting, leaching of good enzymes and bacteria, not bacteria, and protein and sugars and stuff coming out of the meat into the water through what's called osmosis.
All right, so hold on there. I would think if you're putting it in with skin in that water, the contaminants are mainly on, if you talk about most of the deer, a lot of them wallow, they're rubbing in, debris and dirt, it's all through the hair. If you're jumping into ice water, that is now getting in the water, which then has the capacity to go through the meat. Now, I get it's
mainly
probably
on the
just
surface though. So if it's in big
the
chunks,
exposed meat, so not everything. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
No, as I said, it's there's always levels, in terms of so the best would be put in a fridge, and then it would be wrap it, and then you don't have any of those options. Keep it as full of, as whole as you can. Yeah. Keep it as protected by that skin as you can, because you're right that the exterior of the skin, the feathers, birds, shit, dirt, whatever is all where the bacteria is originating from. But likely, and I'm thinking, in my head of a hoof, a leg of a deer. So you keep the hoof on as well. The hoof's got shit, and you can wash that down, by the way. Wash the outside down, because the outside's not where the meat is, and then dump it in. And that's better than cutting it up and putting individual meat in the ice, but not as good as wrapping it in a bag and then keeping it cool.
Yeah, and look, as you said, I think it's important because there'll be people jumping up and down and going, "Oh, I do this," and it's I've never got sick. Yep, no worries. We're not talking about that. We're saying what's best practice. Just because you've always done something doesn't mean it's best practice. And I would think, and the way I at best like to do it is that's why I vac seal it. So chop it up, put it in the game bag, straight back into the vac seal. I don't like losing all the spoilage that you then have to cut off once it's been, the air has got to it and it goes hard. Then getting that vac sealed bag into ice so that if it does become a slurry and there's water there, it doesn't matter because it's not touching it. So that for me, again, my way is definitely not the perfect way. I am lucky I've got the things that are set up to be able to do that when I get back to camp. So if you haven't got any of those things, do what you've got to do. All for that. And I'm not saying this. We're talking about what is best practice here. And I think that's really important for people to understand. That's what we're aiming to achieve, because like you, hunting for me is about meat and meat quality for consumption. I don't want to be losing meat. And I did it with this last the sambar I got. Coming back from Vic, didn't have the full setup. Massive animal, couldn't get it in my fridge freezer in the back of the ute. Just had to run with it and do the best I can. The skin was on, fantastic. Wrapped it in a couple of plastic bags into ice. Okay, not ideal. There's a lot of people there that say terrible wrapping them in plastic. With
microplastics.
There's a lot of things out there now. About microplastics and things like that. Get it. However, at the time, that was the best practice to get it cold, get it. What we had to do, it had the skin on, etc. For the others that we'd had cut out, like the back straps, etc., that was in the game bag, that was in the fridge freezer. No access to water, etc. So, I'm with you that sometimes you can. And then if you're on a backpack hunt, you aren't taking a fridge freezer. You aren't taking an esky.
You're using a game bag and you're hoping the air cools it down.
And hanging it. Yeah. I get that. And that's the thing. We're talking about use the best at your disposal.
100%.
And these things are just triggering and the conversation of what could you possibly do better to make that meat quality better if you have the perfect scenario or not so perfect. If you're going out culling and you're 5 minutes from home, happy days. There's no excuse for you to cut corners to get everything done. If you're doing a trip that's 6 hours away, you got limited space in the car, you can only do X, Y, Z, then this is what we're looking at. Mate, look, to me, that all makes complete sense in what you're talking about. Now, you sort of were talking big chunks. Talk to me about when that meat is breaking down. There's a lot of things that I have read that if you leave the meat on the bone, when it goes through that sort of rigor mortis process and the enzymes are working, because it can't constrict per se, because it's still attached to the bones, that it actually produces a better quality meat. What are your thoughts around that? Something you have heard before or haven't?
Good question. I haven't think about it. And also I just thought I'd add one more thing actually as you were speaking about best practice and worst practice and stuff. Obviously, yeah, as you said, this is in the field, shit happens and things change. A lot of what I said is based on kind of risk, risk balance and pros and cons. Like if you're in a kitchen, you'll change knives. If you're in the field, you may not. And for the likes of plastic, like, for myself personally, I've phased out most of my plastic Tupperwares for when I store hot liquids and stuff. I use glass. But if you're in the field, you have a bacterial risk, and you have an infinitesimally small, that's still not proven scientifically, microplastic risk. So you'll pick this one. But if you have the time, and that's what it's all about. I'm definitely not saying there's a right or wrong way, just that's the risk profile you're dealing with. From the rigor mortis stage in meat constriction, so I'm probably better at talking to fish than I am at meat, but I don't think they'd be much different. In fact, they should kind of be the same. But a lot with rigor mortis for fish, there's a Japanese technique called ikijimi, which is the spike in the brain to stop them twitching and overexpressing, and the ikishinke, which is when you run a wire down the central nervous column and kind of breaks the nerves, so it allows the flesh to break down via enzymes and also not, as you say, over hyperconstrict against the backbone. When I've done that, the ikishinke and ikijimi, and then dry aged it, usually we try and leave it in large pieces on bone, and that's always done pretty well. Rigor mortis, to my knowledge, takes a couple of hours. I think it's like 5 or 7 hours or something. I think if you took it off the bone, again, my thinking would be you're probably more likely just to, you've cut through and literally damaged a lot of muscle tissue. So the chance of it, leaking out and then constricting because it's now lost, attachment to the bone, is probably a larger factor than whether you impacted the rigor mortis on or off bone, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like every time you cut tissue, you literally are damaging it. And so I think those things, and whether it's being bled, and usually when we bow hunt or shoot, it is bled, naturally and stuff like that, that is probably going to have a larger impact, I would guess, than the direct relationship of like rigor mortis muscle constriction versus cutting on and off bone. I hope that answered it, but that would be a guess.
Look, from my perspective, it definitely makes sense that I get, because you think about it, if that muscle constricts and there's no attachment points, then it's just going to keep shriveling, and then it won't be able to, when it releases or relaxes, it's not going to be able to go back to its original state. So the amount those muscle fibers will move will be slightly different. So
and you've damaged, like you've literally cut through those fibers, and you've lost, nutrients, you've lost moisture, blah, blah, blah. So naturally it will restrict anyway, because you got airflow as well. So you're like, you're allowing it to pull on itself basically.
Yeah.
So that's a guesstimate. I've never looked into it more, but that would be my guess.
Yeah. No, look, it's fascinating. I love this stuff. And as I was saying to you before, there's just so much to learn and talk about consistently.
It's mental.
And I love the fact that different people have different ways to do it. And that's sort of why I was saying, hey, just because you do something one way doesn't mean you're wrong. Like, let's be clear. It doesn't mean it's the best way, but it might be the best way for you. And that's fine too. We're not here, I don't want to be pointing fingers and putting people down for their way of doing it. It's not about that. We're trying to work out what's best practice, because for a lot of people, meat quality is super important. Mm-hmm. And if you are trying to get rid of that gamey flavor, because it definitely comes down to how you handle the meat and how you do things, as you said. So the last one I want to touch on that, and then I want to get into your hunting and talk about that, is how do you go about reducing that gamey flavor? Because I tend to find if you bleed it out really well, if you are then I'm very pedantic in how I cut the animal up, I don't find there's a gamey flavor. Like all week this week, we've been having venison, mince, no fat added. So it's just 100% pure venison mince. I cannot tell the difference between top quality beef mince. Flavor is very, very similar. The kids love it. So for me, I really struggle sometimes when people say it's really gamey. I don't get that flavor profile. Maybe my senses are bad, but I don't know. And people might be hassling me. I'm drinking a Corona, so like they might say, "Hey, your flavor profile's rubbish."
I'll drink whatever. No. Good question. So I'm quite passionate about gaminess. Before I go into it, I just want to ask out of interest, what dairy are you eating?
Mainly fallow.
Okay, yeah.
Have had a
That was
variety
tinny,
though. So
because that'll
rusa,
help my
chiddle,
conversation.
sambar. There's quite the variety of it, but again, mostly I have not had a flavor profile that I would say that's super gamey. I've had more kangaroo that would be gamier. And funnily enough, the kangaroo, not when I've harvested it, if it's
when others
been
have.
sort of, so especially from the supermarket, that definitely is one. And then I was taken to a property that had the tags and that, because that's a big issue here. We got an overabundance of kangaroos, and for whatever reason, we have to go through this whole permit thing, and farmers have to get all that. Oh, it's so ridiculous.
You can't just
like
shoot
kangaroo would be
300
something
wallabies like here.
Mate, I would be eating kangaroo all the time. I think it's such a great meat, but getting onto a property, A, I struggle with that, number one. B, then they have to get the tags for it. Oh, man, it's just such a pain in the ass. So very limited opportunity for me to do it myself. In the past, when I have had the chance, a mate has taken me and it's happened. Totally different flavor profile compared to the stuff that you buy from Coles or Woolies that's, pre-packaged. Not a great, well, look, again, from the way I was taught at TAFE and that qualification, not a great deal difference in how I go about the process. I will say that. I would probably get it on ice way quicker. They cull for the whole evening, and then a rule, I think it's an hour after sunrise, maybe two, that they have to get it into the chiller. So it could be out all night. It could be a hot night. There's no stipulation on temperatures, I believe, off the top of my head. Don't quote me for that one. It's been a while since I did that course, and I haven't really pursued having to do it professionally. So I'd need to brush up. But I'm pretty confident the rules are only you can't do it an hour before sunrise, hour after. If it's through that period, you can shoot, say it's dark at 6 o'clock. You can hit one at 6, and if sun's not rising till 6, you have almost 13 hours before that could get in the chiller. So bit of discrepancy between someone knocking one to take for meat, if it's permitted, of course.
Yeah, so the reason I asked about fallow is because I've eaten a few fallow now, and I've eaten fallow from mates that don't care about the quality of the meat, and I've eaten it from mates that do. And fun enough, I haven't really found much difference. Fallow, I think, is just one of those meats that is incredibly low gaminess, especially if in Oz, I don't know, with the lucky ones I've had, most of them are bloody eating on farms. They're wild. They come over eating on farm pasture and pissing off again. And so they just taste, as you say, absolutely incredible. My wife's going, you can shoot fallow all day. Reds, I think, have been, from what I've heard and from the ones that we've eaten, seem to be a bit stronger on average. Again, you may get one that's not, and everyone has their own opinion on what gaminess is and acceptance, and maybe I'll go into it a little bit. But then there's animals that tend to always be noticed as game, like for example billy goats. And they literally piss on each other or on themselves, and they're known as stinky billies, and blah blah blah, and especially like stags and the raw and the rut, when they're full of testosterone, is supposedly an increase in gaminess and stuff like that. Really, when you're just messing with the meat, and testosterone in general tends to affect the meat a little bit. So I think the animal itself impacts it, but then after you've kind of put that aside, after you got the same animal
Hey, it's Bill from the Bill Simmons podcast. FIFA World Cup 26 fans, listen up. As the official beer sponsor of the FIFA World Cup 26, Michelob Ultra is giving away $1 million worth of FIFA World Cup 26 tickets and prizes. Enter now at MichelobUltra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra FIFA World Cup 26 superior access. No purchase necessary. Open U.S. residents 21 plus begins on December 1st, 2025. Ends on July 31st, 2026. Multiple entry periods. Visit www.MichelobUltra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26 for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
And two people are preparing it, that's when I think how you prepare that animal makes such a significant difference. So me and Joe Blogg doing a fallow, you probably eat both and go, David, you're an idiot. There's no difference here. There's no taste. But fallow, generally speaking, I don't think had much of a gamey taste. And I say that because I did a meat soaking in milk video and someone's like, you're an egg, you used deer as an example. And I was like, oh yeah, that was just what I had on the day. But there are other more gamey animals, wild pork. I've eaten that a lot, and I've eaten it from mates that don't treat it well, and others that do, and I think you get quite a significantly different kind of flavor profile, and one that's actually nice to eat. So, and actually one more thing around gaminess. Gaminess is largely opinionated in terms of what gaminess is, but generally speaking, it's off flavors, off smells, which is, could be from proteins, from enzymes, it could be from bacteria, as I said, from spoilage, and it might even be from testosterone and other compounds in the meat that maybe those compounds are like fat, maybe the compounds are oxidized or the fat itself holds it. So there's no, even when I Googled it and I looked into it for ages on the definition of gaminess, but really it's a taste or flavor that I think you wouldn't expect to be there if you had an equivalent farm animal. You know what I mean? Like that's the closest I could get to it. And it doesn't mean it's right or wrong. That's just, but the level of strongness and I guess appeasement to people is when I think you start impacting it. So all the things we talked about already around freezing, and temperature control and temperature abuse and keeping the product whole or chopped up and all that, all is affecting the final taste. And it's not so you got the quality, which is the taste, and you got the food safety, so it's in bacteria. So it's all affecting the final taste. So if you've really controlled that dry aging of the fish, or you've really kept that animal nice and chilled, you didn't let the guts touch the meat, blah blah blah. By the time you then go to cook it, ideally it should not only be safer but be less gamey, because it's been kept in that premium condition. It hasn't oxidized, the bacteria hasn't grown on it, blah, 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 it hasn't got slimy, whatever. Now, if you've got to that part and you're both equal, you've got great, two guys have done exactly the same, and I've done experience myself on this now. Then it comes the question of can you reduce the gaminess any further? And I think you were probably leading on to one you mentioned at the start, soaking in milk. So, big fan of milk. So milk is just an incredible flippin' food, to be honest, but it's used all over the show. But in this specific case, and I asked you at the start how in depth you wanted me to go on the science, but milk is what's called it's got a casein micelle, which is a globular protein that sits in milk. So when you have cheese, you have curds and whey. The curd protein is what's in casein. Whey protein in our protein drinks comes off the bottom. So curds is the casein. That is a phenomenal casein that we still don't really know what it is, and we tried to map it, and there's 5 different models, but it reacts in such a way that it can bind to a whole lot of stuff at once. It's a big fat protein. And then surrounded by that, there's fat globules in milk as well. And then obviously milk is full of water, and then you've got your whey protein in milk and little bits in lactose as well as sugars. So it's what we call like a whole food. This is to do with what I'm talking about. And then so if you go and soak, and the last thing is because of the casein interaction and stuff, it acts as what's called a pH buffer. And now I'm going super scientific. But a pH buffer is if you add an acid, so for example lemons, or you add a base, close thing I think of is caustic acid, the pH or the acidity level won't change much with a pH buffer. So milk is really unusual that it acts as a natural pH buffer. So you can play around with it quite a bit without it kind of, to form cheese or rennet and stuff. You've really got to change the acid with lactic acid bacteria before it changes. Why that's important for meat. When you put meat in, as I said, around the off flavors and stuff, a lot of gaminess is to do with maybe some proteins or enzymes or compounds that's hidden in the fat, maybe it's hidden in the protein. When you place it in milk, what's called denatures some of the protein, or like breaks it down by feeding some protein and fat in and pulling some of those bad stuff out. And because it's so fatty, it binds to any of the bad fat-smelling compounds that's in on the meat. And because it's got big protein molecules, they can bind to other water or protein-soluble compounds as well. So it kind of has a two-in-one effect. And then you coat it with fat, which is a nice flavor. Fat is normally where we get flavor from in terms of our mouthfeel. And it sits in moisture, so you can, quickly extract out bad compounds and stuff out of the meat. So that's why, in a very long roundabout way, I tend to soak a lot of my game in, and I use high fat milk or whole milk powder and water. So in whole milk, because I've found that it seems to really draw out those bad, strong flavors and off smells and stuff like that, if it was there. And it acts as a brine because of that kind of, you would have soaked meat either in a marinade, you use soy, or you use acid, like, citric acid, blah, blah, blah. All that's doing when you make raw fish is breaking down the protein, making it more tender, more soft. The milk acts in a pretty similar way. You don't need to use milk. Some people will use buttermilk for even like for buttermilk chicken. Everyone says you use buttermilk, it tastes better. Some people use pickle juice. Use vinegar when you brine food. It's all acting in the same but similar way depending on the properties of the food. So I hope I answered that. Went a bit deep.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Now, different one. I wouldn't know the difference here, but raw milk or pasteurized? Would that make a difference? Look, and the reason I ask, I currently drink raw milk, and it is so much better. Like, it's ridiculous how much more flavor it has. I don't know, like it sits. I heard this crazy statistic that, I don't know, don't quote me, but it was something ridiculous, like 2 out of 3 people are lactose intolerant as an adult, that they just develop out of sort of being able to process dairy, especially milk. And I don't know, I just sort of went, we got raw pressed milk, or cold pressed, I should say. And I was like, I wonder if that would make a difference as well, because you do tend to see a nice thick sort of, cream cap on top of it. I don't know. It's a very interesting, different sort of perspective.
So when you said raw, but then you said cold pressed, is that high pressure processed, is it?
So look, I haven't gone right through the details. So my understanding is when it's pasteurized, it is heated like crazy.
73 degrees for 63 seconds or something, yeah.
Okay, so, and that kills, well, you'd know better than me, but it kills a lot of nutrients that are in the milk, from my understanding.
That's such a deep question to ask.
That's a different podcast altogether.
Yeah, goodness gracious. That's probably 7 hours I could go
from the very bare basics.
In short, okay. So pasteurization, the purpose of pasteurization is to reduce bacteria by 3 log, meaning 1,000-fold. So if you had 1,000 bacteria, reduce it to 1.
Yep.
That's the whole point of pasteurization. It has nothing to do with nutrients in terms of the intent. It's only to make food safe.
Correct, yes.
Sanitizing, or what we call like canning, is when you go a little bit higher. You say go to 125 degrees, you put under pressure, you do what's called a 12 log reduction, which is 1.2 to the 12. So basically any bacteria is removed. So pasteurization doesn't get rid of all. If you had 100,000, you'd end up with whatever that is, 50. That's the main intent, and it's to take away that spoilage bacteria and those pathogens. There is a level of, potential denaturation or breakdown of essential nutrients and stuff, but a lot of them aren't given enough time to break down to that level in that phase. Because if you use tons of heat or you use tons of acid, you'll end up with a separation of milk and you get curds and whey, which you don't get with pasteurized milk because it hasn't had that level of temperature abuse yet.
For too long. Yep, gotcha.
Then you got homogenization, which is basically just it smashes up the fat globules and stuff to make it all the same, and that's in order to pasteurize it evenly and make sure it's safe for eating. I mean, I don't think it makes much difference, but everyone to their own. It is a different flavor profile, though, to raw milk because it's less processed. You did mention, though, raw pressed, which I assume is what we call high pressure processing. Weirdly enough, I did my thesis on this.
Good. I'm going to take a photo and send it to you. I want to know if I'm just getting ripped off.
No. And yeah, I'll go into the ripped off part second. But if it's been what's called high pressure processed, ironically, that is a type of pasteurization. So Louis Pasteur, the first person that did it, used temperature, but now we found out you can do, different pressures and different temperatures of work and blah, blah, blah. But cold pressed is where you pressurize it under a massive bloody big ton compressor. And because you pressurize it, you don't need heat, but that pressure is enough to inactivate the bacteria. And so theoretically, you kind of pasteurize it anyway, but it leaves it in a much more similar structure than beforehand, if that makes sense. So it's still kind of lower bacterial.
It's still
count,
pasteurizing it, but it's not.
But in a less aggressive
it.
manner. Yeah.
So from my understanding, and again, I'm just like a ape running around with dabbling in this world. The heat is potentially causing damage or reducing the amount of potential micronutrients inside.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of data out there that suggests it's pretty negligible.
Okay.
Like a lot. Like the vitamin A and D doesn't seem to degrade that much, but everyone will have their opinion on that, and you're welcome to. And the other thing I was going to say around kind of right or wrong or sensory is that two people can try the exact same milk, and one might have a placebo. If you go, that's raw, that's pasteurized, or go, oh, that's better.
Yeah.
But another one might go, that's better 100% of the time and prefer pasteurized or prefer raw. Like I actually really like UHT milk. It's a bit more sugary because it's undergone heats of temperature and it's kind of caramelized.
Hold on, wait. You're talking about UHT, like the powdered stuff?
No, ultra high temperature process. In the 1 liter, like super processed containers like in the supermarket. And most people don't. Most Kiwis don't, and Aussies don't like that flavor. I really like UHT. It's like a kind of a sweeter flavor, but a little bit by the by. But for example, you may be able to taste the difference, and you might not. So if that's what you want to do, go for your life. It's but if it's raw and pasteurized, statistically speaking, there is absolutely a high chance of getting food poisoning from raw. Like there's so much data out there, it's crazy. If your risk appetite of drinking raw for flavor and what you might perceive as being better for nutrients perspective, whatever, outweighs your risk appetite for food poisoning, do it. If your risk appetite doesn't, like myself, I don't. But there's one more thing around New Zealand and Australia have incredibly good food hygiene, and we've improved, our food safety 100-fold. We export to countries all around the world. So the raw milk that we make now compared to, and the same goes for raw beef and fish and everything, doesn't matter, compared to what we made 30, 50 years ago, is chalk and cheese. Like the raw milk is just simply safer now because of whether you're a raw milk or you're pasteurized, that same farm, that same abattoir, that same whatever organic farm goes through the same process.
It's always, look, again, even that, we could go down the rabbit hole and talk about this for a long time, because you're right, talking about the processes, you can't compare 50 years ago to what we do now, because the standards, the equipment, the tech, I was watching, I can't even remember what it was. I think it was on YouTube. And I do some crazy different deep dives. And one of them was on raw milk and washing of the animal's teats and everything, and how they go about sterilizing the animal, basically washing the whole undercarriage of the animal before it even gets to where they milk it, and having a sort of period of time, et cetera, et cetera. That makes sense to me. Previously, I think the raw milk, they were shooting it into a bucket, tipping it in, going, hey, we're good to go here. So I can definitely see where, 40, 50 years ago, going full natural, no tech involved, yes, 100%, you are way more likely to get food poisoning for it. It's fascinating. I love looking at all this stuff and researching it. And I put my hand up and say, I want to eat and drink as much as close to natural as possible. Do have my vices like everybody else, love a drink, Pepsi Max. Yeah, I know it's bad, but hey, there's only so much water I can drink. So definitely understand that side of it. It's all fascinating. I absolutely love it. Let's talk about hunting, mate, because
No
we
worries.
could.
And
we'll
balance
do
is
another
key,
round
that's the
because
thing.
I'm sure there's going to be questions. I got more
Sweet.
questions, but
Yeah.
I'm just mindful of time. I reckon we've got about 15, 20 minutes before my kids get
worries.
home. And because of the difference in time with New Zealand and Australia, it's going to be like a cyclone come through this household when my kids get home. So, mate, hunting-wise, you split the channels. Fish, eat, repeat. Also now hunt, eat, repeat. Makes sense. Obviously linked up. Why did you split them? And was it just, look, again, I'm assuming, and that can make an ass out of you and me, but my assumption would be there's a lot of people out there that are fishos that don't agree with hunting. For some reason, fishing and killing a fish is way more acceptable than shooting Bambi. It's a very interesting dynamic because at the end of the day, they're both a food source. So is that the reason, or was it just easier to split the content so people could search for it and watch it? Where did that sort of come from? And yeah, I was curious when that happened.
So you're kind of right on the first point because of the second point. So I had a couple of hunting videos, published on the fishing channel, kind of haphazardly, half-heartedly, every, say, 5 or 6 fishing videos, I do a hunting video. And I started doing more and more hunting. And basically, Instagram and Facebook don't really seem to care too much. Though, and this is my subscribers and followers, I should say, everyone's different. But because I eat fish and killed fish to eat, and that was very black and white, I didn't really ever get any issues with someone going, why are you hunting? I think if I did catch and release, that would have been pretty next level. They would have been like, well, what the heck are you doing? But I never did that, so that there was no kind of confusion there. And I think a lot of my subscribers in that did hunt. But I think the percentage-wise of those that hunt, pulling a number out of my ass in Australia and New Zealand, I'm going to say I guesstimate 80% probably fish as well. Maybe it's even higher. But the other way around is no way. I reckon 25%, 15% of people that fish hunt. And so if my channel, like, I don't know if you know the Weekend Mish, the brilliant pair of guys, bloody legends, and they've got a really cool YouTube channel. They've done like more of an adventure style fishing and hunting since day one. And so people know it's about the adventure and, and they've got hunting and fishing going. And so I think guys like that can get away with it. But then you've got the likes of Jay Wilds, incredible hunter, had a massive hunting channel and started doing fishing videos. And YouTube just gets pissy and starts throttling you. And the same thing happened to him. That's why he split off his fishing channel, because I've yarned to him. Because you'll do a mean hunting video or a really cool fishing video, and YouTube plugs it and pushes out to a whole lot of people. But then as soon as it pushes it to someone that doesn't want to see that, it goes, oh, this channel's shit, and shuts you down. And that's not a blame to YouTube. It's just that YouTube wants people to stay there, wants them to watch videos, blah, blah, blah. So YouTube really likes niches, whereas I think Instagram and stuff is not as bad. You can kind of get away with a more broader fishing and hunting kind of a niche. But in YouTube, it's very nichey. And the other problem is, which I guess we touched on in the previous channel, I got really into drone fishing, which I mentioned was completely by mistake and blah, blah, blah. But because I did a whole bunch of YouTube tutorials, that's where people were coming to my channel. And so the traffic was directing them to see drone fishing tutorials. So when they saw me go and do slow pitch jig fishing, because I love all fishing, or recently flounder fishing or fishing overseas for lures, they were like, oh, okay, I was probably here for drone fishing. But whatever, I'll watch this, it's interesting. Maybe, Dave's talking about fishing and eating and food, which, to be honest, was the original intent of the channel. It just drifted into drones. But then when I started adding hunting on top, it was just confusing the shit out of the channel. So like some of my hunting videos did the best of the whole channel. Like my anniversary hunt with Ginny and Blue Duck Station, my wife, that just blew up. And my dad's going, man, everyone's seeing your video on YouTube popping up. But then I did the next one as fishing, and it just hammered the channel. And all of a sudden the views just dropped off a cliff because all of these new subscribers and stuff were for hunting and then fishing and vice versa. So yeah, I angsted about it honestly for ages. Like my poor mate, Fisher Dave, a really good mate, and he's a YouTuber as well. I was messaging him like once a day, oh, do you think I should change channels? And I'll change the name, and maybe I can merge them, and I'll change it to catch, eat, repeat, and faffed around with these ideas. But anyway, I bit the bullet and thought, if I make a hunty repeat channel, And the other problem, as you mentioned, around timing, how do you have the time to do all this? And so I had to make some changes. Like I set up the Wild Food Scientist podcast around about the same time as I was going through this, and it was just way too much chaos. Like I love talking about food science, as you can see, but it was too hard. I got too into the technicalities, and then it was unmanageable, and I was focused on Instagram and doing reels and blah, blah, blah. And so I kind of really told myself, if you were doing this as your day job, you'd call yourself an idiot, because I audit people as well. And you'd say, what are you doing? Focus. And so I split them and have focused way more on just producing long form or, your long video content for both, and just tried my best to go, let's get the video to say 95%, because that last 5% can take flipping hours. That's minor edits of audio and blah, blah, blah. And then let's spend a year on, literally getting good microphones, and I bought a better laptop, and, I bought an extra hard drive and all this stuff. So I kind of really prepped for it. And ironically now, well, not ironically, I guess that's what happens with planning, but I'm now editing way faster, and I think genuinely producing better content after splitting the channels, because it really forced me to go, does anyone care about the turkey you got randomly as you were going for the ducks? Cut that shit out. You're wasting 4 hours editing that, and then you look at the retention and it drops off a cliff. So, I've really honed myself, and I think I said to you over Messenger, I was a bit all over the show, although people watching this probably say I'm over the show now, but I was over the show on our last podcast because you were asking me about drone fishing. In my head, I was freaking out going, man, I don't just drone fish, I fish and I hunt. But as soon as I split the channels, man, it was like, just sounds cliche and people think it's stupid, but just a wave of pressure just washed off me. I was like, oh my gosh, I can film hunts again. I love filming hunting. I love bringing people on the journey. I love eating it and cooking it and the whole thing. And then it was like, fuck yeah, I can get away with it now without going, yeah, I just spent 30 hours editing this hunting video, paste, and it just dies. And you're like, oh, so gutting. Not that you hunt the views, because you'll get real disappointed if you do that, but just the fact that it was a really humming channel, and then it just, started getting tanked. So yeah, it was kind of literally just to get more views. Oh, sorry, to not tank the channel, but it's ended up being far better, and mentally, which sounds silly, but mentally way better. And I think I also told myself that if you do this, you can't probably submit a video every week or every 2 weeks, whatever. That's just, it is what it is. Keep it as a hobby. I was also starting to not enjoy it, because I was like, really, as you say, with sponsors and all that, you're like trying to pump out videos and stuff. I just had to slash all that and go, nah, if I put out a video, I might have done 3 hunts. One of those hunts might make it to YouTube. It's going to be good. It's going to be exciting. Hopefully I did something stupid, like I fell over or I missed a deer or whatever. Like, people are going to get a laugh. Going to cook some epic food. Same as my fishing. So yeah, that's why.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I was listening to Joe Rogan podcast today. I can't remember which one it was. The one after Cam Haines. And they were actually talking about the fact that YouTube, if you get out of your lane and sort of go down a different niche, like you have with your sort of pigeonholed as drone fishing into, throwing a hunting video out there, that the channel really doesn't like it and sort of freaks out, and then you don't sort of get pushed as much and things like that. So everything you said, actually, I was doing that today as we were talking about. I've been doing yard work all day, trying to get some brownie points up to get out for a hunt with the missus. She'll hear this and I'll get in trouble for that, because she apparently lets me go all the time. But I was doing that and just listening to the to his podcast, and that came up today and before we spoke, because
crazy.
It was really one I was like, oh, that's interesting. And my YouTube probably I have not done any favors, because I wasn't really filming here, because I've got an old laptop. It really struggled with sort of capturing and uploading and all the sort of jazz that goes with that. So I cut the video because there was so many dropouts, and it was just a consistent thing. Since got over to Starlink, a couple of different changes, hosting program way better, also better at using AI to clip things and whatnot. And then I just have to sort of dabble, as opposed to spend hours and hours trying to find good clips and whatnot. So, and then I can now launch through everything that goes straight out to Insta, whatever it might be, and I can schedule. That's so much easier. Before it was it was just so painful. So the YouTube really took a toll, because it was just audio podcasts with just the banner, which obviously not great for YouTube, but I wasn't really, occasionally I'd put something out there short form or whatever it might be, going, oh, that sucks. But yeah, it's a real tricky one because I don't do it for that. But I also want it out there as well, especially for my kids when they get older. Who knows what's, the future lies ahead. Who knows? Having that, documenting hunts, having these conversations, I think that's really important. And there's a lot of people that actually like to watch and see who's talking to who and the like. So I sort of go, yeah, I get it. Now that it's not so much more work, it's a little bit more, but it's not like we're not talking 4 to 1 hours, right? So I'm sitting there going, that makes more sense. So I'm starting to put it out. So this video will be up there. Mate, this will hopefully be a good one. Look, for me, love it. And I can see the lights coming in. The cyclone's about to hit with the family. So perfect timing to wrap it up. Mate, always a pleasure. We're going to have to do this again because I've got more questions in my mind already. And I know once I edit this and listen back, I'm going to have a heap more questions, as I always do. So we'll have to take up another one in the future. But, mate, as always, love your content. No, awesome. If you haven't, I'm sure you have, guys, go out, fish, eat, repeat, and hunt, eat, repeat. I think it's a win. 2 channels dedicated to 2 things I thoroughly enjoy. So, mate, love what you're doing. Keep it up. Absolute pleasure having you on, and thanks for giving up your time and coming on.
No dramas, man. Appreciate it. And please, humble, shameless plug for myself. If you can hit that sub button, it sounds really lame for the hunt, eat, repeat. Once I get to 1,000, that's when YouTube pushes it. So,
is that right?
Yeah. So you need watch hours and subs. You hit 4,000 watch hours and 1,000 hours. So I've pretty much hit the hours already, and the subs is the one.
Well, if you get over for Dave's, do it for his, then go to mine because I'm sitting on 910, I think, at the moment, or somewhere.
That's the one. Do both.
Just do both. It helps channels out, helps us get more content out there, and that's always much appreciated. So thank you to those 900 odd people that have already done it. I really appreciate that too. But Dave, pleasure, mate. Can't wait to do it again. Best of luck fishing and hunting, and out there living the dream over across the ditch.
No, I appreciate it, man. And I think we, I come over a lot. Jenny's actually going to Aussie on Saturday, so we'll try and tee up a hunt sometime. I'm sure we'll get over there.
I mean, we'll let's talk about that. We'll make something happen.
100%.
All right, guys. Hope you've enjoyed this one. Bye for now. You've been listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. Thanks for tuning in, and can't wait to catch you next time. But in the meantime, if you want more, you can find it at linktr.ee/Australian Hunting and Beyond. That will give you our YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, you name it. We'll catch you next time.